Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about some gun show gems that you might find out there laying on the table, and you may pass them by mistakenly thinking that they're just some variant of the SKS, but they're actually their own rifles. And in my opinion, these rifles are actually more cool than the SKS, which I'm holding here now. Now my bias might be against the SKS simply because I've shot them my entire life, but these other rifles I'm going to show you today are pretty darn cool. If you see one, you might want to pick it up and add it to your collection. But before we get started with today's video, guys, if you enjoy our content, please take just a brief moment to click the like, share, and subscribe button. A surprisingly small number of you guys that actually watch our content, click that subscribe button. It helps us out tremendously. Also, comment down below. We love reading your comments and responding to them, and it also helps us with the algorithms. With all that being said, let's get started with today's video talking about these gun show gems you may want to add to that collection of yours. Guys, please swing by and check out Big Daddy Unlimited, BDU. They help support us here at the Military Arms Channel with products and things like that so we can continue to bring you content. There's a link in the video description down below that'll take you to the Mac blog and website. Please follow that link, and from there you'll find a link to Big Daddy Unlimited, and try them out just for 99 cents. You can see what they're all about. In essence, they're just like a big online store that has amazing prices. So please, again, check out BDU. All right, guys, I apologize. We're still in the shooting shack. That's because it's still cold and quite windy outside. We will move our operations back outside when the weather permits. I know some of you guys enjoy us filming in here because you like the scenery, the backdrop. It's a little bit different, but we've also seen comments about when you guys going to go back outside when it warms up. We're almost there. So this is a Russian SKS. It probably needs no introduction. Many of you guys watching this video right now are quite familiar with the SKS. This one is a Russian-made gun. This one has a date stamp on it of 1954. It's a cool piece of history. It's been used in conflicts globally. It's been knocked off by countries like China, things like that, or maybe they did under license. I don't think they did so. I can't remember if the Chinese were still friendly with the Russians at that point or not. But anyway, you know, we saw these in widespread use during the Vietnam War and things like that. A lot of these have been imported into the United States, and they're very commonly found all over the place. Gun shows, gun stores, for sale online. There's no shortage of them. They're Russian-made guns. There's just multiple countries that made these guns, and they have been imported into the United States. We'll just leave it with that versus me breaking down all the different variants. But they all have the same basic look. You'll see some with spike bayonets or blade bayonets like this one. But typically they'll have some form of bayonet on them. But the SKS is a very simple rifle, chambered in 7.62 by 39, very pleasant to shoot. I think it has, you know, great lines, looks good, it's accurate. People hunt with these. They're just really, really great rifles all the way around. Now, I'm going to shoot it here for you really quick because I want to show you the basic operation of this gun, because the way this gun functions is quite different than the other two guns that many people would mistake as perhaps some variant of the SKS and pass it by at a gun show. This gun is completely different operationally in terms of the gas system and some other variations with the other two guns that we'll get into here momentarily. But the SKS generally feeds from a 10-round magazine that's integral to the gun. And you can do that to field strip it, to clean it. There are conversion kits out there to put, you know, AK mags in them. I don't recommend doing that. There are some 20-round mag extensions that the Chinese made, had a star on them. I have one. Again, not the most reliable magazine. If you want the best reliability of your SKS, stick with its 10-round magazine that it comes with. To charge the weapon, you'll pull the bolt to the rear. It'll lock to the rear, even when the last shot is fired. Take a stripper clip, holds 10 rounds. On the top of the bolt right here, you'll see a stripper clip guide. Just set that stripper clip in there, put your finger on the nose of that top bullet and your thumb on the back, and just push it straight down into the magazine. And it should, if everything goes smoothly, charge the weapon. Now take the bolt, pull it to the rear, let it go. Weapon's ready to go, okay? Back here we have a safety. Safety is on in that position. To make it ready to fire, you simply flip it down and start shooting. Very similar sights to what you would see on World War I bolt actions, and it's very similar sights to what you would later see on the AK-47 variants. So the Russians have really stuck with this type of sight arrangement, open iron sights, for quite some time. But of course, optics are now taking over. Shooting this gun is very pleasant. I love the SKS. and the gun locks open on its last shot fired. Put another stripper clip in there and resume shooting. So very quickly, let's take a look at how this gun operates. I'm not going to take the, well, actually, let's take the bolt apart because this will become germane to the conversation we have today. I'm not going to explain in detail what I'm doing here. I'm just taking the gun apart. Okay, so what is important in this conversation? So the SKS, here's its bolt carrier and its bolt. When the bolt is home with a live round in the chamber, the rear end of the bolt drops down much like an FAL, and this is your locking surface right here that locks into the receiver. When the gun fires, the gas piston will come back, tap the face of the bolt. When it does that, you'll see how right here, mechanically, it'll back up and lift this out of its locking recess. It'll cycle rearwards, go forward, go back into battery. The locking shelf drops down, and the gun is ready to fire again. Very, very simple mechanism. The gas system, here's your primary gas piston, which you can easily take out of the gun, but what a lot of people may not know is that it's actually a multi-part gas piston. So this piston will come back and tap another piston that's contained where the rear sight is. So if I take a live round, push on the face of that little piston with a spring on it, you'll see where the piston pops out, and that's what actually contacts the face of the bolt carrier. Okay? So it's a multi-part gas piston system. So how it locks and how it functions by its gas system is going to be critical when we talk about these next two rifles. So let's take a look at these rifles. I absolutely love these guns, and if you have the opportunity to pick one up, please do. I think you'll enjoy shooting them. So let's take a look now. This is easily one of my favorite Cold War rifles. It was developed just after the Second World War by the Czechs. Back then they were known as Czechoslovakia. Today it's the Czech Republic. But I will use the word Czechoslovakia because that's when these things were in use and being manufactured. Now there are two different versions of this rifle out there. There is the original Vz.52 or Model 52, which chambers the 7.62x45, which is a longer cartridge than the 7.62x39. The by 39 means it's slightly shorter than the by 45. That's case length that we're talking about there. So the original rifles were chambered for that 7.62x45. After the Soviets applied pressure to Czechoslovakia, they went ahead and adopted the 7.62x39, and they stopped the production of the 52s, and they renamed them the Model 5257. So in 1957, that's about the time that they switched over to the 7.62x39. If you're shopping for these, you see one laying on the table, be very, very careful which one you purchase. If you buy the original Model 52, it will not chamber and shoot 7.62x39. The ammunition, because this is the only rifle that ever chambered 7.62x45, the ammunition is nearly impossible to find. I have a case of it because I found it a long time ago at a gun show, and even if you get a case of the ammunition, every other round will be a dud because it wasn't stored properly generally. So you'll get a rifle that you can't use. So you want the 52-57, and you'll be able to tell that by the markings on the side of the receiver, which I'll take a picture of so you guys can see it. This one's clearly marked 57. So look for that 57, and then you'll know you have a 7.62x39. You'll also take the by 45. I have a slightly different profile to the magazine than the by 39, but you really want to look for that model number on the receiver because that's going to be for sure how you're going to tell which version it is. So this one's the 57. It chambers 7.62x39. It looks a lot like an SKS. One thing that is common with all of these rifles of that era is the fact that this one has a bayonet as well, but this one stores on the side of the rifle. There's a little button right out here on the end of the nose cap for the stock, and if you push this button, it will release that bayonet, and the bayonet will swing out and deploy. To put it back into its position, folded position, just push that button again, the bayonet will fold right back into its recess into the wooden stock. Very, very cool in concept. The rifle, unlike the SKS, whoops, dropped it, does have magazines that are intended to be used by, dropping the magazine out, loading them, and putting them in. They're a rock and lock. It has a toe in the front and a locking lug in the rear, much like an AK. Has a little tab right there in front of the trigger guard. Just push on it. The magazine will drop out. It's also worth noting that you do have stripper clips for these rifles. I've tried to use the standard Russian/Chinese stripper clips on the rifle. They won't fit. So there are special stripper clips, I believe, out there if you want to do stripper clips, so you don't have to, carry spare magazines. The magazines can be had, but they're rare and expensive. So that's one way to load the gun. The gun, we're going to take it apart here for you and show you its operation. Where this thing really, really is cool is its gas system. It's unlike anything I've seen in any other military weapon that's post-World War II. I only have 5 rounds loaded. I'm going to go ahead and load the magazine. You'll also notice that we have a rear sight here, very much like an AK, that's adjustable for elevation simply by pinching and sliding the rear sight up and down. We have a protected front hood out here, and then on it we have a little detent system for the end cap, and I do have a blank firing attachment for this rifle, and you can shoot blanks with it if you find one of the blank firing attachments. The BFAs I found online, and they're fairly affordable. So let's go ahead and charge the weapon up. It has a reciprocating charging handle, just like the SKS, so you'll pull the bolt to the rear, charge the weapon, and then this one pretty much ejects almost straight up. Oh, also the safety right here by my index finger, it's very much like a Garand or M14 style safety. Push forward for fire, pull it rearward for safe. So when you get ready to fire the weapon, put your finger in the trigger guard, push forward, makes the weapon ready to fire, and then start shooting. Just like the SKS, locks open on the last shot fired. You can drop a magazine out, put a fresh one in, or if you have the stripper clips, use the stripper clips to reload the rifle. So what makes this rifle different than the SKS? The gas system. Check this out. To get to the gas system, you have tabs, metal tabs, on both sides of the top handguard. So all I'm going to do is pinch those tabs and pull up on the top handguard and take it off. This exposes the gas system. I'm going to go ahead and lock the bolt to the rear here manually. There we go. And so this gas system, you may not understand, so I'm going to show you guys how it works. I'm going to take this out, which will give you a better understanding of how it works. So take this out of it. This is just a horseshoe-shaped piece of sheet metal, which connects to the gas puck right here. The gas is vented off. It travels around the barrel, and this entire puck, doesn't really matter what position it is, traps that gas and gets pushed backwards like this. When it goes rearward, it pushes on this sheet metal sleeve. The sheet metal sleeve will then push on this part right here, which has 2 actuator arms. You can see one on this side and one on the other. I'm going to put that back in place. I'm going to put the sheet metal rod back in place so I can demonstrate how this gas system works. So when the gun fires, you'll watch right here around the chamber. I push back on the gas piston, and you see those 2 little arms popping out? That's just a short stroke gas piston. It taps the bolt carrier. That sends it rearward and cycles the action. Very, very cool. You're not going to find another rifle that I'm aware of that had any type of military use that has a gas system quite like this. Very, very much Czech in design. When I was in the Czech Republic, they still use these like we do, M14s as drill rifles. They have some really chromed out guns and stuff like that, and their soldiers, when they're parading and stuff, will show them off. And it was really cool to see. So yeah, that's one of the really cool areas, how the gun works. Another interesting thing is how this gun disassembles. So with the SKS, we just have a pin we pull out, and then the back plate comes off. With this rifle, you'll see these serrations here. You'll push forward until you hit a takedown point. Then you'll be able to lift up, and there's a lot of spring in here, guys, and it likes to coil itself. There's your recoil spring and guide rod. And then you take your bolt back, and there's little cutouts on the other side of the receiver back here. You'll slide it to its takedown point. Once you can see it, there it is. And the bolt and carrier kind of rock out, okay? It's not pushed straight down. You put this side in first and rotate this over for it to go back into place, because only one side is fully cut out, okay? So you rock it into place. I'm going to rock it out of place and take it apart. A couple of really, really cool things about this gun. First of all, this bar across the top is the extractor. On the bottom here, there is a little spring-loaded piece that when it hits a point in the receiver, when I push forward on the spring-loaded piece, see how that plunger comes out? That's your ejector. So when the bolt travels rearward, it'll hit a tab that's machined into the machined into the receiver, and it'll hit that ejector, and it'll throw that spent case pretty much straight up. The locking system on this is different than the SKS. Let's take it apart here for you really quick. The locking system, instead of locking back here in the rear with a tilting bolt, the bolt on this, these are the locking lugs on either side of the bolt, these two ears. So when it goes home, you'll see that they'll lock into these recesses just in front of the chamber. So it goes home, pop. See how the extractor gets lifted up and the bolt drops down into its locking recess. When the gas collar comes back and hits that bolt carrier, it's going to cause this to draw up out of its locking recess and move rearward, eject that cartridge, and that little tiny machine spot right there is what's going to actuate the ejector. So again, and you can take this out of its stock very easily, things like that, but this is just basic field maintenance. So you can see how you could mistake this for an SKS, but internally, this gun is quite different in terms of how it functions and in terms of the gas system and its locking system. It's really, really interesting and definitely a cool find if you see one out there laying on a gun show table. This is an Egyptian Rasheed carbine that's chambered in 7.62x39, and it's a little brother to the Hakim, which is chambered in 8mm Mauser, and the Hakim is a licensed copy of the Swedish AGM42. So this is basically a miniaturized version of the Hakim, and again, it chambers the 7.62x39. There are a lot of things about this rifle that, would make people think perhaps it's some form of an SKS. It's roughly the same size, wooden stocks. It has a very much, Soviet style or even Chinese style bayonet. You notice that it has very similar sights with the V-notch here in the rear, and then the protected front hood sight up front. So again, it's using very similar sighting systems as the other two rifles, but that's where the similarities, for the most part, on this rifle end. This rifle is kind of like the Vz.52, 57, in that the top cover goes forward, but unlike the Czech rifle, this isn't how you take it apart necessarily. We'll get into that here momentarily. The weapon also is capable of taking stripper clips. It has a stripper clip guide up here, and the Chinese stripper clips that I have kind of sort of work, but the magazine is also removable. It has a locking tab on the magazine, and to take the magazine out, you have to release the lock, then push forward, and the magazine will come out of the gun. Now, I do have 10 rounds loaded. Put the magazine back in the gun, push it until it locks, rotate this locking lever over. The gun is really intended to be used with stripper clips. As you can tell, changing magazines isn't the easiest thing to do. To charge the weapon, you have a charging handle over here, which is interesting to note. The other two rifles have reciprocating charging handles. The Rasheed does not. So I can pull the bolt to the rear, and you'll watch when the gun cycles, the charging handle stays in the forward position. Poor little guy just doesn't seem to like this Golden Tiger. It's happened a couple of times. All right, so there's another important component to this gun where the other guns use gas pistons of some sort. This is a true direct gas impingement rifle, meaning it taps gas off up here. On top, you can see the triangular shaped valve. It takes a special tool. You can control the gas flow. I may actually need to increase the gas flow on my rifle in this case. And that gas comes down. The hot gases come directly out the end of the tube and interface with the bolt carrier face and push it rearward. This is a true direct gas impingement rifle. When you're talking about rifles like the M16, it diverts gas off, brings it back into the bolt carrier unit, which is actually an internal piston design. This does not have a piston. The gas directly again impinges upon that bolt carrier face. So let's take this gun apart because again, it does things differently than the other rifles. To begin that process, the bolt's already locked to the rear. I'm going to go ahead and drop that magazine out. Let the bolt go home. Now notice the bolt's in the rear position, but the charging handle is moving freely and independently of the bolt. Again, that's different than the other two rifles. I'll go ahead and let that bolt go home. Now I'm just going to pull forward slightly on this top cover. And this is your safety system back here. So over here is fire, over here is safe, and in the middle position, it allows you to draw this rear piece up and out of the rifle like that. And then that top cover will slide right off. There's a little tiny guide rod inside the top cover that the recoil spring rides on. Take out your recoil spring. There's no little guide rod in there, buried in the recoil springs, nested. And then we can take the bolt out. You just pull the bolt to the rear and it will slide right out of the rifle. Now, like the SKS, and unlike the CZ50 or VZ52, don't call it a CZ52 because that's actually incorrect. This also has that same dropping block that this is your locking surface on the bolt. So again, you'll see this commonly used in the FAL, the SKS, and rifles like this. This is actually a very common and simple system for auto-loading rifles. And just like the FAL and the SKS, you have a bolt carrier and a bolt that sets inside of it. You can see the rather beefy extractor, and then it has a fixed ejector in the receiver that brings it all together. Let's see if I can get this thing back together. It's trying to remember. You have to line things up. There we go. All right, got him back in there. So now you can see how that works. Now what's also interesting, the safety mechanism is watch this little end piece here. As I move this, that's to fire, and you have the cut right there that allows the trigger to move rearward. When I put it on safe, it simply rotates that cut away and blocks the travel of the trigger. It's a very simple safety mechanism that's built into the rear of the rifle in this little piece that you use for disassembly. Pretty interesting design. When you put it back together, you kind of have to push down on the hammer to get that bolt to go over it. Line up your dust cover, make sure that recoil spring gets onto its guide. You can do that by sticking your finger kind of up in there and guiding that spring onto its guide. Push it forward, make sure that your safety lever is half mast. When I say that, I mean put it pretty much right in the middle, and then drop it down inside. Wiggle that around until it finally drops like that. And now it's back together. You put your magazine in and lock it into place. And that, my friends, is the Rasheed carbine, built in the 1960s. About 8,000 of them exist or known to exist, and you'll find them in various states of disrepair. But if you can find one, it's certainly a neat rifle to add to your collection, especially if you already have a Hakim. I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at some of these somewhat oddities of rifles that you can find out there many times just floating around in gun shops, hanging on the walls, and sometimes at gun shows and various places you can buy guns online. So if you see one, you can find it for a price that you can afford. I'd recommend picking them up. They're collectibles and they are really, really fun to shoot, and they definitely are quite different than the SKS. If you brought this Rasheed out to a local firing range, people saw you shooting it, I would imagine they would come over and ask you questions as to what in the world it is that you're firing, and you can tell them all about the history of the Hakim and the Rasheed rifle, and of course its original predecessor, the AG M42. All right, guys, if you would like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, please consider becoming part of our Patreon family. There's a link down below. If you become part of our Patreon family, you have direct access to me. I answer all private communications. You get early access to videos like this and other perks as well. Again, there's a link down below. Also, right here on YouTube, there's a little join button right underneath the video player. Give that join button a click, and you can support us here on YouTube. And last but not least, guys, please swing by and check out coppercustom.com. Thank you for 13 years of support. We'll talk to you guys soon. One neat thing I have with regards to the Vz.52-57 is the blank firing attachment. Now I have some Brown Bear blanks. This is what they look like. And this is the blank firing attachment. So to put the BFA on the front sight, the bolt is locked to the rear, gun is unsafe. The front sight has a little detent, so you can push that detent in with your finger and unscrew the existing muzzle device, which is just a thread protector. Screw on the BFA. I have 5 rounds loaded of the blanks. It really doesn't matter what I aim at this point. Quite a bit more muzzle flash, but yeah, the BFA works really, really good. And I did find this within the last year or so. I think RGT Parts or something like that may have had them, or Numerich or something, but I did find one and I thought it was pretty cool. And so I ordered some blanks and they seem to work pretty good. So kind of fun.